your professional development plan. I'd like to thank everybody who set about carrying out professional learning sessions. So what right now, if I look at what you sent me, they're fairly large global plans. And we want you to really get, I say we, but I'm speaking for this STEM ed group, right? Kessler's group and Buren's group and this project. So I'll say we or me and Ann, but I'm really referring to the larger project. It's not we, I'm doing this for the project. So the project really wants you to get much finer in your professional learning goals. And so I'm not, in order to support that effort, I sat down and I said, what do I do every time I carry out professional learning? And so I'm going to share my screen with you. I asked myself this series of questions that guide me and the people I'm working with in planning professional learning.
It's not sure.
I haven't done it yet. So let me share my screen. Okay, I think everybody can see this, right? Unfortunately, Ann and I did not have time to vet this with Kesra and Buren, but I think they would agree with this. So these are the set of questions that I ask every time I do professional learning. And then I take these questions and I transform them into goals for the professional learning. Now, today we're specifically supposed to be talking about health in our hands.
No.
I'm sorry. So, I just landed in the US, so please forgive me if I'm a little bit incoherent. So we're speaking primarily about water quality, but these are questions that for every professional learning, right? If I understand, and Kessler and Buren, please correct me. You're to create professional learning goals, or professional learning sessions for each one of the curricula, as far as I can tell. So you have to create 3 professional learning. And so these are just in general goal questions. No matter what professional learning you're planning, at least what professional learning I'm planning, I ask. And so I'm going to go through this I'm going to go through this question by question. So this should not actually be a surprise for you because it really follows kind of the methodology we've been talking ever since day one, ever since I first we started interacting with you last year. And so these are the questions. Are they exhausted? Maybe not. Do you have to answer each one? Maybe not. But nevertheless, these are questions that you should think about and then transform into learning goals. And Ann will give you an example of transforming one into a learning goal in a second. So what I really like people to do is if you have comments, please put them in the chat or raise your hand and Ann and I will respond to you, right? So we'll monitor the chat, but more importantly, we'd really love to hear from you, right? This is a collaborative effort. So we really need to hear from you and how about what you think. So, and these questions aren't necessarily in order. So they're just questions that we need to use to guide ourselves. So,
and as we go, if something doesn't make sense, you're confused about something, or you know, have other ideas related to it, please jump in the moment.
Right. So question number 1, how will you support teachers in helping them understand why having students experience phenomena is important? What will you do in your professional learning to help teachers understand that? And this is particularly true for teachers who traditionally focus solely on helping understanding learning ideas, right? So we want to, and so so often teachers don't focus on phenomena, right? They focus only on the science ideas. And often children, learners have a hard time separating out the phenomena in the real world versus scientific ideas. So how you support them in understanding phenomena in all the curriculum, including water quality, is driven by a variety of different phenomena. Any comments or questions on that? And then question number 2 is, what will you do to help teachers support their students experiencing meaningful phenomena? Right? So what will you do in professional learning to get the teachers to realize why experiencing how they will help their kids experience phenomena, and why, in helping the teachers, the ones you're providing the professional learning for, why is experiencing phenomena so important in science education? Any questions or comments? Question number 3, how are you going to help teachers to transition to using evidence-based active pedagogies? And down below, we actually articulate a few of those, like how do you support them in explanations? And how do you support your teachers in helping them write scientific explanations so their kids can write scientific explanations? How do you support your teachers so that they can support their kids in constructing models, right? So that's what we mean by the evidence-based active pedagogies. The evidence is now insurmountable by engaging kids in those kind of activities. It really supports their building of scientific knowledge.
Me.
Okay, question number 4. And then I'm going to transition this one over just to Anne so she can talk about the learning goals just for a second. How will you help teachers establish an engaging context for student learning, and why developing context is important?
So in the water unit, if you remember the PDs, I spent a pretty good chunk of time really stressing this importance of setting a context that students find meaningful to them. So to translate this question into a learning goal, the example is highlighted in blue. We take that question, how will you help teachers establish an engaging context for student learning and why developing context is important? And then the learning goal for your PD will be able to say teachers will be able to set an appropriate context and be able to explain why setting a meaningful context is important to promote student learning. So we just kind of translate the question into more of a statement that that's the learning goal. So that's what we'll be doing, like the idea with all these questions.
Right. Any comments or questions? You will see that the learning goal is basically the question minus the how, and then substituting in with teachers will be able to. So the learning goal should probably start with always the teachers will be able to.
On to 5.
Yeah.
So for 5, again, how will you support teachers in understanding the use of driving questions so that teachers can provide an explanation of why it's important to use driving questions? And what are you going to do to support teachers in developing this understanding, not just of the driving question, but even like of sub questions, how the questions are something that teachers are always going to be connecting back with to help students in their learning over time.
Okay, so number 6 actually takes us to one of the evidence-based active pedagogies. So question number 6 says, what will you do to support your teachers, either if they're pre-service or in-service, in helping their students construct scientific explanations by writing a claim, using appropriate and sufficient evidence, and reasoning, i.e. scientific ideas that can actually show why the data counts as evidence to support the claim. Really an important, that's as when we were talking about scientific explanations, doing our workshops on those. Constructing explanations is what scientists do, right? It's the end result of what science is actually all about. So it's a very important practice because we want classrooms to be authentic learning environments. And so engaging kids in writing these explanations is really critical. Question number 7. This is kind of a broader question, but this is more related to what are you going to do to figure out what content teachers know and what they need to learn, right? So these units have different levels of content. So for instance, if you look at the interactions curriculum really focuses on the notion of energy and energy being able to be transferred, which is and that it's transferred in fields. That's a very different idea of thinking about energy than how we traditionally taught about it in the past, which is related to various kinds of forms of energy. So how will you help your teachers understand these new important ideas, and at the same time help them understand, these new concepts, or helping them understand that absolutely in the world, everything is basically empty space, and there's force. It's the forces that prevent us from actually putting anything through it. That's a tough concept for people to understand. And so, what are you going to do? So we're looking at the content, and you'll have to decide. Some areas will be trickier than others. In the water quality unit, actually helping the kids think of a system is really challenging, right? The water quality is really part of a system. So how are you going to help your teachers so they can understand the notion of systems and the importance of systems, so they can transfer that understanding? They can do that in their classrooms.
And then kind of going hand in hand, question 8, are there particular science ideas that you think teachers may struggle with, and how you support them to develop understanding? There's no way in your PD that you will have time to go through all of the science ideas, and nor should you, right? Teachers are capable. So trying to identify those particular science ideas that teachers are going to struggle with, and then focusing on helping them to understand that. I don't know if you want to add to that.
So 7 and 8
They're
kind of related.
they go hand in hand.
We didn't really have a whole lot of time to filter through this, but these are the kind of things after I got this, I spoke with Kesra. Well, I actually wrote them an email. So we were doing this. Anyways, so number 9, how will you go about figuring out teachers' understanding of and use of scientific practices and helping the teachers understand and experience those practices? So engaging kids in actually the doing of the science. In the past, we always called that inquiry, right? So we want to get kids involved in actually doing the science. We want them to be involved in asking questions, planning and carrying out investigations, collecting data and analyzing that data, and then forming claims based on that evidence and scientific reasoning. So what will you do to support them in those various scientific practices that are so critical in actually doing inquiry? So you want to, what are you going to do to support the kids in investigations? How will you support your teachers so they can support their students in carrying out various investigations? Now, we realize they're not going to do totally open-ended investigations, but certainly guided investigations, like you actually saw in the water quality unit, where Anne actually very carefully first demonstrates various water quality tests in the classroom, and then the kids actually go out to the stream to collect their own water quality data. That's not very different than what I did myself as a practicing scientist. I certainly didn't just learn new techniques on my own. People always showed me how to use a technique, right? So we still have to show kids how to use techniques, but then we really want them to go about doing the science, which in the case of the water quality unit is actually using those water quality tests and going out and collecting their own data. How will you, and then related to that is how will you support teachers in creating collaborative learning environments? Now, there's a couple more questions below related to that, but collaboration is a huge part of what scientists do. They work together to plan and carry out investigations to make sense of data. And it's so critical, the communications and collaborations that occur. So
So.
go ahead.
In terms of collaboration, and 10 kind of is connected to that. You know, collaboration just doesn't happen. It's something that students have to learn how to do. They have to be taught how to do, and you can model how to do it. And I have found, you know, in the United States, well, in my teaching, right, it's very collaborative. And I have found myself that when students were home for a year with COVID, and then they came back to school, you know, they had to like relearn how to not only collaborate with the science, but just how to talk with each other in productive ways. So it's something that has to be thoughtfully implemented. And teachers, you know, have to, as part of your PDs, and I think that this is crucial for any of the 3 units to help students develop this notion of collaboration, that they're not just learning things from the teachers, but they can learn from each other. They can contribute, but they also need to listen. So this active engagement.
Okay, so, and I think what I'll do tonight is try to put some of these together. But anyways, there's still good questions asked. 11, how will you support teachers so they can support their students in knowing how to construct scientific models? The construction of models is another essence of what scientists do. Without the construction of models, then it's what allows them to predict. It allows them what to explain, right? So they want to make sure that the data they collect can actually be explained using some form of a scientific model, because that'll allow them to predict the future. And so constructing models is a very important scientific practice. And it's not one that was often done in science classes, as far as my knowledge, at least from my experiences. We were always given someone else's model, but now we're being asked to construct models. So how are you going to support teachers in this effort? You can't just assume they're going to know how to do it. And that's true with any of the practices. How will you support teachers, your teachers, seeing the value of students developing artifacts? The practice of kids building something that represents their knowledge of how to respond to the driving question is very different than what typically happens in classrooms. Yet it's actually in that building of that artifact that will help kids actually synthesize their ideas, so they actually have deeper and more meaningful understanding of the science concept, and then in responding to that meaningful question related to the unit. And then question number 13, how will you support your teachers in understanding of and use of cross-cutting concepts, right? This is going back to the various content ideas, both the disciplinary ideas, the practices, but also the cross-cutting concepts. You know, we take for granted that people understand cause and effect. And it's really well known that even intelligent, adults who are in really good professional positions get cause and effect and correlation mixed up. And they're so very, very different. Understanding other cross-cutting concepts, like how the structure of various structures actually impact functions. And you can think about that from the molecular standpoint of a molecule, how the structure of a molecule influences its function or properties. You can think of that from a biological point. Why does a certain bird have a certain structure of a beak? How does that support its functions of being able to eat? You can think about it with respect to materials, right? Why does something have the built the way it is, make it so much stronger so that it doesn't collapse? So structure and function can be applied at the microscopic level, the macroscopic level, and is really critical as a thinking tool. And then lastly, how will you ensure that teachers understand that coherence, ideas that ideas build on each other, and that our instruction should actually be designed in that manner so that ideas actually build on each other and become more sophisticated over time. Coherence is really critical for student learning. It's been extremely well documented, particularly in the area of mathematics learning, but it's true in all areas. How do you really support that idea? And one of the most important things you have to think about is that sometimes you just can't take out certain lessons because that lesson is really necessary for building some other ideas, right? So you have to be very careful of that. So how will you support teachers in that process? So these are the kind of questions that I ask whenever I plan a professional development. And when I say I plan a professional development, it's often along with my colleagues, right? It's not just me, but it's with them. And so that the first step that I do in any professional learning, when I plan professional learning, is I have to know my learning goals. And that's why Anne showed you this one particular learning goal up here. You can translate these questions into your learning goals. Now, the other thing that we is I always like to create this summary table along with it. And so what you'll see is that across the top, you have your professional, the first column is your learning goal. What's the professional learning goal for this session? And then the second column is what's really critical. And this is what I thought many of you needed to do in the plans that you provided, was what exactly will you do to support that goal, right? What are you going to do to really meet that goal? What learning experiences will teachers have in the professional learning to really build that goal, build that understanding related to that goal? And this was what I thought many of you really needed to do, is go take it in that one deeper step, right? Often, you had things not specific enough. Now, maybe it's a little too early, so I'm not trying to be negative. I'm just trying to push forward how we can do our professional development work. And then of course, so those two, and then the third one, it's the fourth column though, is how will the participants, I'm sorry, I misread it. How will you know? That's what I knew what it was. I just misread it. How will you know that your participants achieve that goal, right? That's your assessment, right? So always thinking about, what are you going to take as a measure? What are you going to take for evidence that you in fact achieve that learning goal? That is critical, right? So you can change this one to say, what evidence? Sure. So let's, Anne suggests, so let me give an example. So let's go to the learning goal over here. It says that teachers will be able to set appropriate context and be able to explain why setting a meaningful context is important to promote student learning. Well, so one thing you could do for this is I would actually take as a measure, a true measure of this, right? Like the best measure of this would actually be going into a classroom and seeing if it's fact the teacher does set the context, right? This is why, at least when I do some professional learning, when I'm doing my curriculum work here, we always go in the classroom, because seeing what the teacher does is really critical. But we also ask teachers to create artifacts in our professional learning. And you could take as an artifact that teachers have in their plans or in a map of their professional learning this important idea. That would be another form of evidence. Not as strong, but certainly some good evidence. So, and then the other columns are a little bit easier, right? One is, how long is it going to take you for this, right? So you really want to, we all seem to have different lengths of time we can use. So how are you going to accomplish this? And of course, you may have to change some of your professional learning goals based upon the amount of time you have. And of course, it's also very important that you have materials. What materials will you need? And then finally, I always like to reflect on what goes on. Reflection is really critical. So as in organizers, what happened? What did you reflect on that in fact this occurred or did not occur? So I thought from looking at your plans, this is how I best thought I could help all of you. And talking to Kessler and Buren, we really just need to get in a level deeper. So I don't know if Kessler or Buren want to add to that. And then we'll go on to the next part.
No, yeah, I think you try, yeah, because you try to lay out a lot of like setting that they will think about the details. Joe and can you maybe in terms of the contextualization, like, could you provide examples that or that a
So in terms of contextualization,
yeah
if you go to the water unit,
Just pull it up.
there are some ideas in there.
Mhm.
So you can talk, I'll pull that up real quick. Can you unshare?
What? I'll stop sharing.
You want to talk for a minute?
Okay, let me go back to the question. Okay, when Ann pulls it up, I'll just talk about another one. So for instance, let's go to the Health in Our Hands curriculum.
Mhm.
So in the Health in Our Hands curriculum, because that all deals with gene environment interactions, that curriculum starts off by the students actually observing a young girl talking about how she has type 2 diabetes. Now, in type 2 diabetes is actually a disease of old people as we get older because we didn't take care of ourselves, right? It's not a disease of a 13 or 14-year-old. It can happen sometimes, but it's the prevalence of it happening currently in the United States and elsewhere, in countries like Mexico, which is extremely odd, right? So that's setting the context. Why are we learning about gene environment? Why are we learning about why we need to take care of ourselves, right? The kids don't know that the goal is gene environment interaction. That's what they're going to learn throughout the unit. But they're setting this context that we have to study how we take care of our bodies. Otherwise, we can get some awful diseases at very young ages. So what do we have to do to really, so that's setting the context. And the kids then have a discussion on it, right? So it's not just watching the video. It's actually also having the kids discuss what they observed and then asking questions themselves. That idea of kids, experiencing something in the Health in Our Hands curriculum, it's actually seeing a young woman, a 13-year-old or 14-year-old, talk about how she developed type 2 diabetes, and then the kids, watching that, and then them themselves asking questions. That's all part of the contextualization process. So that would be an example, one way of how you set that. But how do you support the question here is, how do you support teachers in actually seeing the value of that, right? So we're the professional development facilitators. How do we actually go about supporting teachers, our teachers? And again, I'm using teachers fairly generically here, meaning both pre-service and in-service. I know some of you are doing in-service and some of you are doing pre-service. So I'm using generic teachers in this particular case. So how do we support teachers in general to set that context? If you look at the interactions curriculum, we actually have kids experience some really unusual phenomena early on, right? And ask, so for instance, they put these pie plate, and then you can ask how real world it is, but the fact of the matter is that electrical interactions are all around us, and we just don't realize it, right? So we put these pie plates on this Van de Graaff machine, and all of a sudden we see these pie pans fly off. How can that possibly happen? We didn't touch them. What's going on that caused those pie plans to fly off? We do this little experience, and then kids have to ask questions related to that. and then they draw some initial models. Those models are totally off base. And we know that, but it's getting the kids to think about why this might happen, what's going on here that would actually cause this phenomenon to happen. So that's a different way of helping the kids to contextualize the unit. In each case, they're observing something and they're wondering about it. That wondering is is such a critical aspect about creating meaningful context. What is going on here? So do you have your example, Ann?
Yeah,
Okay, so I'm going to pop this over now to Ann, and she'll give you one in water quality, since today is supposed to be focusing on water quality.
Thank you, Joe.
okay, let me know if I need to speak louder, but this is.
Just go on here, so I'll
That's
mute
okay.
mine.
This is the right from the water quality unit and instructional sequence. Now, this says 1 to 2, this in this unit, it says 1 to 2 days. In my unit, because I do it for a whole semester, I set the context for a couple of weeks, doing several activities, but it can be done pretty short. There's some language to that teachers can use or modify just to start asking students questions about their water use. And so there's some language here, and then a small group brainstorm. So having kids with partners, why should we investigate water quality? Now, hopefully you'll notice in the setting of the context, I'm also trying to begin to set a classroom of collaboration and questioning. So students are working in small groups, students are sharing out, so they have to share, they have to listen. And so we're already, creating this. So even though Joe and I presented separate questions, many times you can address those multiple questions in the same activity. So the purpose of the small group brainstorm and sharing, if you see right here, is trying to first get a sense of students' prior knowledge. And then this box here, these are like boxes like teachers for reading, trying to make learning accessible to all students. So it really doesn't matter if you live in an urban, a suburban, or rural environment, or if you live in an area that's rich with water or scarce of water. Every single student has everyday experiences with water. And so part of the contextualization for the water unit is that all students can feel like they can contribute, but also to show that it's really important. Water is important to every student's lives. So I'm trying to make the unit engaging to everyone. Okay. I have students ask, why should we investigate water quality, such as rivers, lakes, and streams, again, to try to get a sense of their current understanding, to try to help them, again, to start thinking about, to start questioning, and to share. And then, do you think people are related? So we do a classroom share, different groups share, and then there are options, right? So one option is to have an introductory video that's related to a freshwater creek, stream, river, or lake, where the teachers in various areas can find, often in their own neighborhoods or in their own cities or in their own regions, things that will help set a context. So I have put some here related in terms of the United States. So the Environmental Protection Agency in the United States has a video, and it's a video that isn't local to my community, but it certainly connects with my community. Here's another one, it's called Urban Water Voices. So there are some resources already, and then some ideas on what to do with it after students watch it. There's a UNESCO water quality in people, that one's more global. And then also I had looked up 15 recent water quality issues, threats in Michigan. This was this was a video that I found locally. And so I would, to help set context, have teachers just spend a little time researching themselves and talking with other people in the PD. If people find some really valuable resources. And then I also, in terms of setting the context, have students write down specific questions related to water quality, because I'm going to introduce the driving question, but then we can put students' questions as part of that. And for the water quality unit, almost, I can't say 100%, but 95% of students' questions are things we are going to engage in, right? So I'm trying to tell as little as possible, but to affirm students when they ask questions to say, this is something that, we need to know and will be learning about. So right in the unit, if you can get your teachers to read through it, there's a lot of ideas. And then another thing, if it's feasible, is to take the kids outside and take a stream walk. If it's not feasible, to have a video of where they're going to be studying water quality. So these are right in their ideas, readings, etc., for students in terms of setting a context. I think there's questions in the chat. All right, so.
Thank you. Thank you.
So
Anne.
it says you need to register in order to access the teacher guide.
I think because there are some new group of participants, that's why Dr. Burin, that has shown interest, and that's why because they might not have
Okay.
yet. Yeah, so we would like to know that who they are. Am I
Okay,
right,
so-
Dr. Burin? Right? Yes.
I would suggest
Yeah.
that you access the unit from Concord. I would just send you the link to the water unit, and then no one has to worry about signing up for anything, and the
Yeah.
whole guide.
Yeah, I think the Burin purpose is to know who our participants are,
Oh.
because so that we can get back to them later on. We just, we don't want just to to be one time off event, right? So I think that's the purpose. Yeah,
Okay.
nothing else.
So
Yeah.
in addition to that, then I would get, you can get the entire teacher guide from start to finish, one document. I don't know how easy that is to find on the Concord one. And the Concord one, they've tried to set it up in separate lessons, I think. I haven't looked at it there in
That's
a
right.
while. You can do both. But I would also encourage them to have the entire teacher guide.
May I also ask for your input about the idea of having participating teachers in a workshop, be able to realize that how this unit is aligned with their standards, right? In order to convince them that the unit that they are going to be introduced, they actually cover a lot of the topics and competencies of students in the learning standards in their country. Yeah.
So I'll share the document again, but
Yeah.
this is one of the transitions
Yeah.
that people need to make, because there's a fear that doing learning science by doing, and this project-based learning, that students aren't going to learn science ideas. And that's just totally the opposite of what's true, right? Some teachers worry that students, that I've heard the word fluff. I've not heard that for 20 years, but 30 years ago, when I introduced this type of pedagogy, that was the worry, that students weren't going to be learning enough science ideas. And then, as I said, that doesn't come up at all anymore, because for several reasons. One, students do learn a lot of science ideas, but two, students, for many, for the first time, find science learning worthwhile, because many students don't like science. And for the first time, like they see how important it is, how engaging it is. So let me pull that up again.
I put the link, there's a one click. So I know if you want to have people register, that's one thing. But if you want to just get the curriculum materials really quick, I put it on there's just a 1-2 click way of doing it. You go to the URL I put in the chat and just look for the water unit and just click on it and it'll download right into your computer.
Yeah. So yes, I think that also should be, in my view, that should be part of the PD too, because even though it's in the unit, but how we can ensure that the participating teachers, they realize about this, and maybe some activities that help them, allow them to be able to map about what's the concepts and skills, the learning goals that student will be expected to achieve are aligned with what are identified in their standards. I think that process is also very important, right? Because you map with the NGSS and your US standards, but
So,
allowing teachers to map with their national standards also
right,
very.
so one of the things we always do in professional learning is we there's certain activities that are challenging and contain really challenging content, you might say. And so we always have teachers experience those, we always have students experience those like they would as a student. Not that they're a student, but they actually just do the activity.
Yeah.
But then afterwards, right, if it could be building a model, it could be like the tape activity, or in the water quality unit would be actually going out and actually collecting the pH and the temperature and the turbidity and then writing in an explanation, right? We always do that as part of the professional learning. But then as part of the professional learning, we also do what's called debriefing sessions. And in a debriefing session, we focus on two things. One is what did they do as learners, right? So they collected data, they analyzed the data, right? Whatever they did. But then we also have them point out what were the big scientific ideas that were involved in this process at all as well, right? So it's another way, rather than just listing, we actually during discussion bring out what were some of the big important science ideas. And in my professional learning, we always start off saying, what are the major learning goals that are in this particular unit? In fact, the units, the curriculum materials that we build are more across a year. So we help teachers realize that when students focus on these materials, they're actually meeting the learning goals they're supposed to from their state, if their state in fact adopted the next generation science standards. So I agree with you that it's important for people to see what other content that's there.
So if I go back to the water unit, at the beginning here, these are the performance expectations in terms of the top in yellow are the, so what are these? Those are the disciplinary core ideas. So there's a table here, but then this next page, so this summarizes the science and engineering practices, the disciplinary core ideas, and their cross-cutting concepts. And so this table has a lot of ideas in it, but and this can be picked apart in a with teachers to show them the center part are all the science ideas, but then also, we really want to make sure that the three are kind of integrated with each other, right? And so we're using the practices and the cross-cutting concepts as we engage in the science ideas. So this summarizes it. And then if teachers continue to scroll down, this is set up here where it takes the practices and the DCIs and the cross-cutting concepts for each lesson and shows what the learning performances are. So I don't know if this would be valuable, but it's spelled out in a summary here, and then each of these are also in each lesson.
Are those in the materials that I just told them to download?
If this is the unit, the water unit.
Yeah.
Yes, right. So for example, for lesson 1, in terms of setting, context, students generate questions to explore how human activities related to products people use on land may negatively impact populations of organisms in fresh water, right? So this is right out of the NGSS. So all of these, so this is lesson by lesson. So this is the entire unit, right? So teachers and people, you doing the professional learning sessions can direct teachers to these. So again, they're at the beginning and then they're in each of the lessons. Kessler, do you want me to talk any more about that or just showing?
Yeah, I think this is fine. Yes, I think that's that helps us to find
So if
out.
we look at 18 here, and if we think about the questions that we were talking about at the beginning, so right here, this one, right? Students will construct a model how various water quality measures resulting from human activities in agriculture, industry, and everyday life can have major impacts on rivers, lakes, and streams. To illustrate cause and effect relationships, that small changes in one part of the system, we're looking at the stream, might cause large changes in other part of the system, and that stability might be disturbed either by sudden events or gradual changes that accumulate over time, right? So this language is taken from this, this chart in the NGSS. So it's spelled out kind of step by step in the unit. Again, at the beginning, like pages 5 to 9 or 10, and then also within each lesson. And I think Consuelo was saying that's the same thing in Health in Our Hands and stuff, right? So I think is that for all 3 units
What?
that you have the.
They're always there,
Yeah,
yes.
so that's, so those are set in all the units. So all of you don't have to create these on your own. They're already embedded in the unit, and what you might need to do is modify them or take them just as is, as you're preparing for your PD.
Yeah, I think because you map that with the NGSS, right? And for teachers, they need to map with the national curricula standard.
Right.
So I think that's that is very helpful. And Joe, thank you.
So I'm gonna upload this to you guys in a second, but I just wrote another one based upon this conversation we just had.
I'm trying to click on your links and find my water unit, but I'm still looking.
Okay, so here I'm gonna share my screen with you, and I'm gonna show you the one I just wrote. Share, and then I'll put this back up so everybody can see it. So the one I just wrote was, what will you do to help? What will you do to help your teachers understand the learning goals of the unit and that they contain important disciplinary core ideas in scientific and engineering practices?
And cross-cutting concepts.
Well, that's why I said
Okay.
important. That work together And we taught, a lot of the early professional, a lot of the early sessions we had together actually focused on this idea that if kids are gonna be able to solve problems and explain phenomena, i.e. actually be able to use their knowledge in new situation, these disciplinary core ideas and practices have to be used together.
Mm.
So I don't know if that captures what you want, Kessera, but you can change it if you want to change it.
Yeah.
That's how I would phrase it for myself. And I'll drop this one into the chat so that everybody can have it as well.
Can you click on the link you shared and show them to get to the water? Because I clicked on it twice and then.
Sure. So let me show everybody, if you want to get to the water unit, what I'll share I'll just copy the URL. I'm going to stop sharing.
Click on that one and do it from there.
Okay, so I'm going to just click on this one.
It's in the chat.
That's in the chat. I'm going to do it right now. And when I do that, it takes me to this.
You gotta share and do it.
I'm going to share right now, honey. I can't do it simultaneously.
Oh, you can't.
When I clicked on that, what it did was it pops open this particular page. And then if you scroll down, you'll see grade 7 and 8 water quality and Novak Green Hill Schools. You click on this little thing right here. It says access the curriculum. You click on it. And when you click on it, it actually downloads into your computer and it opened up for me. I don't know if you can see it here. Then, so what it did is it automatically, I'm going to stop sharing and I have to share again because of the way this thing works. Share. And what it did is actually opened up the water quality unit. I think this is it. It popped this open. So that's how you can get to it. And so this is the water quality unit. You can see there's in the water quality unit. It's really important these are fairly detailed. They have a lot of supports for you and for your teachers, including an overview of the project. And you get to you can get to the prior knowledge that students need. And then it gets to all the learning goals that the teachers are gonna have to have, right? We're just right on page 5. Now, I know one of you actually started to write your own unit. That's a negotiation between you and Kessera and Buren, right? I'm not part of that. I think it's probably likely that many of you are going to have to adapt these units to your environments. But in so doing, you have to be very careful. What I understand what this grant is all about is really engaging kids in the act of doing science and not just presenting ideas. So the grant really wants you to get your kids involved in writing explanations, in developing models, in analyzing and interpreting data, in having discussion, lots of discourse with each other and talking about the data, these new forms of these evidence-based pedagogies that are really important. So we know that, one of the things that I do in the United States is that I always have built my work upon the learning goals that the district that I'm working in has, right? That's why I've been so successful. That's why I've been successful. School districts have to meet their learning goals. I understand that 100%. So you're going to have to work within your own area. But the major focus has to be on making sure they have these evidence-based reformed pedagogies. And a lot of the units we try to give you, including water quality, including interactions, including health in our hands, actually have fundamental ideas that kids have to learn, right? So if you look at the water quality unit, it's filled with really rich ideas that if kids are going to help grow up into the world, to help make sure we have a sustainable environment, that it's just essential. Although you may have to modify it at times. So I realize that, but And so these are given you as examples, but it's making sure that the kids that the kids in fact are the ones who are engaged in the learning, right? If I walked into the classroom, I would see the children involved in analyzing and collecting data. I would hear them arguing about the meaning of the data. I would see them constructing models and discussing their models. I would see them building artifacts that would summarize the driving question of the unit. I would see them using evidence, right? These are the things that, as I understand the grant, Kesra and Buren want to see happen in your classrooms. And a
Yes.
lot of your professional learning has to focus on that, because as far as even in the United States, where we've been focusing on these ideas for at least the last 11 years now, many teachers still don't know how to pull it off. And I think someone was trying to say something and I interrupted him.
You wanna unshare?
Mm. Yeah.
Okay, I'll stop sharing.
Yes,
So,
yeah, I like to emphasize that, yeah, we know that a lot of participants might have gone through maybe many approach, inquiry, 5E, yeah, I think, but in this grant, we would like to make sure that coming to the scientific explanation, we are able to adopt the CER and modeling, right? So, and we believe that these units have been built to embed that approach already, so that you don't need to reinvent the wheel. And to adopt those practices in the learning unit that you might have, yeah, I think it depends on what you think is appropriate, but I think at the end of the day, when we conduct the effectiveness of this program, we want to make sure that the researchers who going to observe the classroom or observe the video from the teachers who implement the units, they'll be able to see the artifacts or the student work that demonstrate the scientific explanation that we believe that the CER and the modeling is something very tangible that we can distinguish the explanation that is different from the existing one. So I think that's a point that we want to see that the kind of explanation that we introduce make a difference in student learning and student outcomes. So and we understand that in pre-service programs, adopting the whole learning units might be very difficult. So we provide rooms for participants to adopt, but the practice of the CR and modeling is, in my view, is the key. And that's why in many workshops in the past, during the webinars, Dr. Joe and Dr. Ann have spent time introducing that, right? If we don't see those, it would be very for me, the teachers will lose the opportunity of being able to benefit from the learning units and from the practices that we introduce. And because this program is not about developing a new unit, because we used to give grants to educators to develop learning units. It takes time, and there are many factors contributing to developing good learning units, and we don't want to spend a lot of time to make sure that we got good learning units, because it can spend, like the time spent can be like the entire year, because we went through that cycle already and we realized about how to get good learning units, while Joe has introduced us to the learning units that have been developed, QC, used, and proven through the research. So I think that that can be a good example for all of us here. And yeah, I believe that the level of adoption might be varied according to the context that each country might have. And yeah, but I think the bottom line is how we can benefit from all the sessions that Joe and Consuelo have shared with us. Yeah. So Joe and Anne, how would you like the upcoming, because you have to leave at 8:30, right? How would you like them to do? You think breaking up in groups, and at least maybe they can discuss some idea?
They
and
could,
share it out?
I can put the new version, I'll just drop it into the chat right now
Yeah.
of the document.
Mm.
And one of the things they might want to do is we could spend 20 minutes or 15 minutes.
Mm.
And they maybe different groups could actually just pick. They could pick one of the questions and then transform it into a learning goal.
Mm.
How does that sound?
Mhm.
Although I will try tonight to sort of put these together. Again, I wasn't able to synthesize them because of I just got home too late. So, but I'll just drop this into the profession, I'll drop this into the chat again. And then maybe we could have each group just try to translate one or two of the questions that they find really important into a learning goal using Anne's, using the example that we had that Anne gave related to that. How does that sound?
Mhm. Yeah, that's great. And if they have time, and if they can even think about, but maybe I know that limited time, they can start discussing about what kind of learning activities that they plan to introduce in their PD, just to brainstorm
Right, well,
some idea.
Right,
Yeah.
they could work on the chart as well. Again, today we're
Mm.
supposed to be working on the chart with water
Mm.
quality. So
Mm.
they, if I pull up that, if I pull, oh, I haven't put it. Okay, I just put it in there. People should see if they can download it, but I'm gonna just open it up again on my computer. And people could actually just start by trying to fill in a part of that role, right? I think would be very valuable. I'm gonna share my screen. Okay, so what you could try to do is fill in one of these roles, right? So change the question into a learning goal. And then how might you go about helping your teachers actually meet that learning goal? And of course, you could have other learning goals too, because you could have a very specific learning goal, like what will I do? Or teachers will be able to support their students in writing scientific explanations with claims, evidence, and reasoning. And then, what will you do? You then say, well, we're going to have a session, a 1 hour session where they're going to experience some phenomena. They're going to collect data. They're going to write a claim with evidence and reasoning, and we're going to critique those things. So that's one way to go about doing that, right? So you could maybe try to fill in a row.
So are they gonna go into breakout rooms for a bit and come back and do a little sharing? Will there be time for that?
Well, again, Ann and I have to leave I really have to leave at 8:30, so, or I'll be late, and Ann has to take me to the bus, so we can break in the breakout rooms, and then Kesra and Buren, if they wanna keep going and having them share, I think that would be a good idea, or we could just continue with it tomorrow, Kesra. It's up to you.
Yeah, I think we can continue tomorrow, so that you also can like be shared about, about
So
what they
maybe-
think. Yeah.
So maybe the goal would be right now
Mm.
for them to try to fill in, pick any role and pick any question, try to turn it into a learning goal, and then what will be the activities, what will be the experiences that they will provide teachers in the professional learning to meet that particular learning goal. How's that?
Mhm.
And then tomorrow we can go over those.
Question?
Yep, question.
Question.
Yeah, so I just want to confirm because we have 3 unit lessons, and if we, for example, if we want to apply all 3 topics, water quality, interaction, and health in our hands, it means that we have to answer those questions for each topic, or we just make a general one.
You know, helping, just like what I did for you, right? You could, in doing explanations, you could either do it within a particular unit, or you could help them just understand how to do explanations in general, and then do it in the units. So it's really, it's really up to you. If you remember, I introduced you to writing explanations by me showing a demonstration, because we couldn't do it hands-on, because we were I was here and you're there, but I did a demo. I showed you a movie where I actually mixed some chemicals together, and then remember they puffed up the bag, and then I asked you where new substances formed. And so then you guys wrote an explanation with evidence. So you could do something generic like that, or you could do it within the water quality unit. All 3 of the units, health in our hands, water quality, and interactions, have as a central practice the construction of evidence-based explanations. And once again, the reason why is because that's such a fundamental practice of what it means of doing science. So that would be your choice.
Okay.
But as far as I understand, and Kesra and Buren can chime into this, you are to create specific plans for each one of the units / modified unit. Is that correct, Kesra?
Yeah, I believe that when you deliver the PD, right, Dr. Money and all, yeah, you will have some specific goals relevant to the units, and you might have maybe the general goals that for any unit that you introduce, they have to understand maybe the CR, whatever, right? So I think this depends on your design. Some group, they might pick only 1 unit, right? But I believe that yeah, some practices can be applied to all units, right? That you want to introduce to the whole group. But when coming to specific investigation, I think this depends on your design, right? That how you are going to introduce these 3 units. Are they from the same group? Are they from different group, right? And how you are going to introduce and make use of your time to help them understand. I think it can be, yeah, depending on your design and your management of the group. Yeah. And also your people, the resource who are going to be able to deliver the PD to this group. If you have, if you break them up into like maybe group according to the units, are they going to be able to rotate to to the station? Yeah, I saw yeah, the many approach that help the learners to understand the common practices, and maybe the units relevant to them, or maybe they have a rotation of understand each unit according to the station. Yeah, so this depends. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I think those question just shared by Joe is very important because, and also very benefit, I think, for us, help us to redesign again the PD plan, because I just sent to Joe the the general one. So I think this question helped me a lot to think again about the PD plan. Thank you.
Yeah, but your plan also very important as the starting point, right? To have overall picture, right, of who the participants are, right? And Joe's question will help you dive into more details of the planning, yeah, the PD activities. Yeah.
I thought I saw someone else was gonna say something. Egama, were you gonna say?
Is that I name?
Yeah, I turned the camera. So, may I clarify, so what did you mean by saying group, Kesara? You mean the target audience for each unit, or you mean, do you mean is the target audience for 3 units the one group or the 3 separate? Do you mean by that?
Yeah, depending, yes, this is depending on your design, right? That who your target group are and how do you expect them to implement the units, right? Are they going to implement the only one unit or the whole, the 3 units that you are going to introduce? I think this depends on the expectation that you have towards the learners, right? And
So,
yeah.
if we have, if we're gonna implement the 3 units for one target audience, so we should fill out that form which Joe gave us with the same idea and goals, right?
Because in later on, I think Joe will later in other sessions that you will start to develop more details of the agenda of your PD sessions, right? It will come to the agenda that you are going to deliver the PD activities. How does it look like? That, for example, in 1.5 hours in the first session, what are you going to do, right, to achieve the learning goals that the participant will achieve, right? If so, the question is a starting point, and it will lead to the detailed agenda later. Yeah.
I see. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Right, so one of the ways you want to think of this is if you're doing all 3 units, you're certainly not, the first unit, you're gonna have to focus more on how they build explanations, right? You can stress it one way or the other, right? So you might spend a lot of time on how do you support kids, how do you support your teachers so they can support their students in building explanations. But then in the next unit, you don't have to focus that much on building explanations because you already did it, right? So you want to review it a little bit, but you don't necessarily have to go as in depth. So you might go more into depth about how do you really support kids in discourse. And I can't remember if I passed out the various kind of discourse moves that you can ask. We can certainly do a session on it too, or I'll put that in our Google folder as well, right? So that in the next unit, if you spend the first unit really concentrating on explanations, it's not that you're going to ignore discourse, but you're not going to really focus on it. Then in the next unit, you can back off a little bit from explaining how do you support kids in explanation, because they should know that. And you can go a little bit deeper in how do you promote discourse in the classroom, or how do you build a model. So you might introduce people to modeling in the first session, really focus on explanation, and then in the new unit, the second unit, then you really focus more on modeling and not as much on explanation, right? So you want to have it grow over time. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yes, it is.
Because there's no way, I've done this, I've created year-long curriculum, and each of the year-long curriculum actually have various practices, et cetera, in each of the units. But there's no way possible that in the first, however long that first professional learning is, that you're going to cover all the practices. It's almost impossible, right? So you have to figure out which one you're going to do first, and then build on the other ones across time.
Yeah, and actually, in my view, uh, if the same group receive the the PD for all the 3 units, it would be very challenging for them to be able to absorb and understand, right? Uh, how to do it in one shot. I think that's quite challenging. But if you introduce unit by unit, in my view, it's easy for them to understand, digest, practice, and then you support them how to do it. Because there are many new practices that they need to try it out with confidence. Yeah, that's my view.
Right, you know, and as Kessera said before, I want to thank you once again for the professional development that you sent me. And a lot of you, professional development plans you sent, a lot of you in there talked about how you're going to recruit the teachers, et cetera, right? But, and what we have to do now is really just go a step, we have to go deeper in how we're actually going to carry out each one of the professional development sessions. And so that's what I was trying to get across for today was how do you do that? And so then I stopped and I asked myself, what do I do? And with my, with my students and my postdocs and stuff, and we do this. And so I said, it's always this, we always start off with learning goals. And you can ask any one of the people I work with that if they don't come with learning goals, I really get upset. Right? So the first thing is always learning goals. Right? You have to know what you want people to learn. What do you want to hope to get accomplished? And you always have to ask yourself then, how am I going to do that? And then how am I going to know that it really happened? Right? So that's where that assessment comes in, right? How do I know that really, really happened? And so that those 3 parts, what is it I want to see happen? How I'm going to make sure that that happens, and how will I know it happens, is just really critical. That's what I was trying to get across today and giving you that table.
I have a question also for Anne about the water quality unit. If, for example, for a PD for teachers, in your unit lesson, the students will learn about the impact of pH, the impact of temperature, and the impact of floating particles, oxygen dissolved in a different day. So, for example, if we just bring the teachers to observe the stream or river, and then they just they observe or they measure not only pH but also pH, temperature, and also floating particles at the same time, and then they go back to the class and discuss about what the effect of those 3 factors is. It what do you think if we do like that? But for the for if they because we have limited time for training our teachers.
Mhm. So I think the reality is that this is going to be the case for many teachers, right? They'll have one event where they go out and collect several pieces. So I think that can definitely work. I would share the data for each separate water quality test and try to discuss each of them separately. And then I would see if there's any connections between them, because temperature and turbidity often go together and can create problems, right? And so having teachers have experience and then have their students, you can collect several pieces and then separately look at them and then see if they're connected. I think that can definitely work. And then there could be some options too for teachers, depending on time, right? They could have some students, they could write an explanation for each one. Everyone could do that. Or different groups could write an explanation for one of them. And then they share, and then together, because if they write separate explanations, they'll have 3 different claims. If all the data is positive, or all the data is negative, it's easy to make a claim for all of them. But if the data is mixed, then they could also have a rich discussion on what, based on those 3 water quality measures, the health of the stream, what is a claim for the overall health based on all 3, right? So you can, teachers could facilitate a rich discussion with that, right? We get more evidence, right? Based on the evidence, I'm talking about, it's really very healthy water quality, but based on this evidence, it's not very healthy, right? So that's why there's several different options for that, but that certainly can work.
Thank you, Anne.
So I'm gonna have to wrap this up. Tomorrow, and again, it's up to Kesra and Buren if you stay on or get off, but tomorrow we're gonna focus on interactions. So if you're gonna create a learning goal specific to a curriculum, it should be related to interactions for tomorrow. And I can't seem to find my when the next session is, but Ann will be back with us, I believe, next week.
Yeah, I'll tell you.
And so you can save her, you want to sort of plan that professional learning, at least maybe a row or 2 for water quality so that you can present it next week to Ann,
Next Thursday.
next Thursday, February 8th. And so that's when Ann's going to be on. So tomorrow, what we're going to do is we're going to focus on interaction. So if you're going to do any of this work, it should be on interactions. I'll show you, I'll try to just rearrange these a little bit more so they're slightly tighter and more cohesive. And so tomorrow we'll focus, hopefully you'll come with a row or 2 of these things focused on interactions and you guys can present them and I can critique them, right? So tomorrow would be great if you came with what's 1 or 2 of your learning goals for interactions? How do you hope to accomplish it? And how will you know that it actually happened? Right? So what does you want the teachers to learn? How are you going to make sure they learn it? And what's the evidence you're going to use? So those are the 3 questions that we want to see answered. And it's the 3 major parts that are on that table.
And then for next Thursday, you could do the same, but for the water quality.
That's correct. And then those plans just get more and more articulated as time goes on. Like, so for my own work, we have this table, but then we always have an elaborate PowerPoint or lesson plan for each one of those, right? So you have to think of this just like you're teaching. Each one of those have to have a lesson plan that really focuses on how you really pull that off.
And I know for all 3 units, while we were doing the PDs, we were using PowerPoint. So you should feel comfortable to take anything from those PowerPoints that you could use in your PDs, right? So I know I speak for me, Joe, and Consuela for that. So take them, use them as is, modify them for what will work with your groups. So those, I think you have all of those, right? So,
Okay, and then lastly, and I'll put this in our folder as well, but I just dropped into the chat a really short little article that I wrote maybe, I don't know, 6 years ago on professional learning. It has many of the ideas that I just talked about today in it. So if you take a look at it, it was published by the National Science Teacher. If you keep scrolling down on it, you'll see the chapter comes up. It's chapter only, I gave you the whole book, but it's only chapter 3 that you're looking at that's in that file if you keep going down further. It actually was one of the, it was a book published by NSTA, and my chapter was one of the chapters they gave out free because they thought it was valuable. So I was happy at that. So take a look at that chapter, that might help as well. And with that, I unfortunately have to really get to my regular full-time job, so. Kessler, I don't know. I don't know if you want to have them stay on and you can still talk to them, but that's up to you. But I have to just take off. I apologize. But I'll see everybody tomorrow, tomorrow evening and my early tomorrow morning.
Yeah. Thank you, Joe.
So, right.
And
Bye-bye.
yeah, bye-bye. See you, Anne, next week, and see you, Joe, tomorrow.
thank you, everyone.
Yeah. So I think we will meet tomorrow, right? Yeah. And yeah, if you have any question, just yeah, drop me any message. Okay. So
Thank you, Kesara.
yeah, thank you everyone and have a good night.
You, Dr. Kesara. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
bye.
you.
Thank you
Bye-bye.
everyone. Bye bye.
Bye, Aida.
See you tomorrow.
Bye, Professor Soleh. See you
Bye.
tomorrow.
Bye.